Okay, thank you everybody. Thank you. We're starting a little bit late, but we should be able to kind of make that time up, I think, over lunchtime. My name is Louis Rice, one of the co-organisers with Rachel and David of the conference. My task this morning, apart from introducing the speaker, is to, I guess, just comment on those who weren't here yesterday on some of the issues that were raised yesterday at the conference. Just to mention that Routledge will be producing the next iteration of this book. This is from the last conference, which was about dissidence. This conference on transgression will be a number of articles published from people contributing to this conference. David Littlefield and I will be editing that book, just to kind of make you aware of it. Yesterday we started off with Bernard Shumey. He reprised his work from kind of the late 70s on transgression. It's very kind of eloquently put, beautiful French accent, which kind of was mesmerising. We finished off with Didier Faustino, again another beautifully French presentation of his work of an architect. I fell in love with both of them. Both setting out very different ideas about transgression or what that might be. In the sessions yesterday, we had a really varied range of talks about how we might practice as architecture, what architecture might be, how we might teach it, how people might engage with it, how it might become more relevant again. So really interesting and really varied set of kind of talks and presentations, really kind of, I guess, at the forefront of where the profession or where cities might be, I guess, in the next kind of 20, 50 years. Some probably equally interesting is the methods through which people are accessing cities. So I heard yesterday of people following elephants, tattooing, shagging, invading spaces, filming, even throwing chocolates as a way of accessing or disseminating knowledge. There's really varied set of kind of methods or kind of methodology developing, I guess, in terms of transgression. I think today we'll probably enrich that even further. And Doina, if I can introduce her now, is going to talk about her work, the work of her practice, Atelier d'Architecture Autogérée, terribly pronounced. Autogérée, sorry, I'm incorrectly spelled. For whom most of you mentioned, I've heard Doina's practice referenced in a number of the talks yesterday. So it'd be a really interesting kind of practice, again, really interesting series of works.
Thanks a lot, the organizer, to invite me as a speaker in this conference, and also thanks a lot for many of you being here. I'm feeling very familiar with this crowd. I know a lot of people, and I also want to apologize to those that have already seen some of this work many times. So I hope I will be able to say something new, even there might be the same images. In fact, today I'm proposing this term and this notion of self-managed architecture as a form of understanding transgression within a certain definition of architecture and also of architectural practice in the context of the current challenges, which are economic, ecological, which are, touching up on uneven development, social injustice, and so on. And somehow my question is, what is self-managed architecture? But this question, I'm addressing it from the point of view of Atelier d'Architecture Autogérée, which is not my practice, is a collective practice in which I am involved. Well, I was also co-founding it, and I'm representing here today. Also, I have a double head because I'm also teaching and an academic researcher at the University of Sheffield. So the question would be, what are the means and the tools, the processes, the agency, and the tactics of such architecture autogérée, yeah, which is the self-managed architecture would be the provisory translation of architecture autogérée, which is something also that we are affirmed in our name. Yeah, we are called Atelier d'Architecture Autogérée. And the question would be, why is it transgressive if it is transgressive? And also, what is the research methodology, how to research self-managed architecture in the making? Are the architectural humanities helpful? And should we also push or, let's say, transgress their boundaries? So, Atelier d'Architecture Autogérée, for those who do not know us, it's an activist practice set up in 2001, and we try from the beginning to be a collective practice, to include architects, artists, urban planner, landscape designer, sociology students, and maybe what is quite specific is that we were including also residents and users of the projects that we were doing. So they were also part of the practice for many reasons that I will explain. And what we wanted to do was to facilitate, this was somehow our program, which was somehow a political program, to facilitate the reappropriation of space by residents and the creation of places for new collective practices and reinvented urban commons that will be self-managed by users. Somehow, as architects, we were promoting a bottom-up production of space, one that has social, political, and economic consequences. And I think that there are many reasons for why we were doing this that are biographical, that have to do with a history of architecture, with a history of activism also. So we place ourselves in a particular lineage, but also another thing that we wanted is to reinvent collective practice in the city. We were thinking that this is missing, that specifically in big cities like Paris, specifically in this metropolitan context, or like in those of some European cities, which are culturally, socially diverse, which are also uneven developed. As, for example, we can see these spots, these red spots, which are most of them in the north of the Parisian region, are area called Zone Urbaine Sensible, which are in fact areas of neglected from development, and also areas of social deprivation. And we kind of set up our practice with this as a goal to act in these areas. And our first project was also in the area in which we were living, which was one of this area. And the second project that I will show today is in a similar area, and we perceive them also as areas in need, but also as opportunities, because there are lots of, say, funding opportunity for civic projects in such an area. And also lots of people that have time to invest. This was also a sort of, type of funding. Yeah, it's social capital. And we decided to set up the practice as a non-governmental organization, which is also sort of kind of tactical decision, because this was the way to capture this type of funding. and also this was also the way that will allow us to include in a professional local organization non-architects. So urban tactics somehow are at the core of our practice. We are somehow developing and engage activities in the urban realm which encourage inhabitants to reappropriate tactically vacant land. Of course, we were interested in Desserteau's definition of tactics in relation to the practices of city user. He speaks about witty forms of resistance to capitalist consumption in his well-known book, Practices of Everyday Life. And this through everyday life activities like dwelling, cooking, walking, reading, which are all tactical in their nature as they are improvised and take advantage of all opportunities afforded to them. And we have added somehow architecture to these everyday life activities. I think that this is very important, that we are considering architecture also as an everyday life activity. And in our case, this means gardening, self-building, recycling, learning. All these were activities that were included in this definition of architecture. And we conceived also a number of spatial devices to enable temporary appropriation and occupation of space, like pallet constructions, mobile modules, demountable buildings. Desserteau says that the space of the tactics is the space of the other, stating that it is this absence of power and armed space that is the tactics trend. And tactics work with time and are opportunistic in their method. They do not plan in advance, but they use their own deviousness and the elements of surprise to get things done. And somehow our tactical urbanism is different and perhaps in conflict with the traditional urban planning, for we do not plan but act, sometimes without permission and against the rules that we estimate appropriate or unfair. And all this subversion is a sort of art which involves inventivity, time, and passion. According to Desserteau, tactics survive through their mobility, and from this point of view also, all our spatial devices, I would call this our architecture, involve forms of temporariness and mobility, like temporary occupation, mobile architecture, dismantling constructions. So the first project, Echobox, started in 2001 and is still ongoing, but it's labeled as a temporary project. And it started in La Chapelle area, which is at the north of Gare du Nord. It's an area that probably you do not see or you didn't know since recently, probably because now there are a number of new developments taking place. And it started with a mapping exercise that we did with our students to identify, to kind of record the existing and available space in the area. Being an area, a sort of urban island between the railway tracks, there were a lot of spaces along the railway available, but also disused or misused spaces inside the island. But what we did also is to map the potential actors that were schools, that were local organization and their territory of interest in such a way that we can have a potential group of people potentially interested in investing in these projects. And in fact, these urban wastelands that existed at that time in La Chapelle were perceived negatively by the inhabitants. They were spaces of, where you know, a crime would take place, prostitution, drug transactions, and so on. And somehow we transform tactically maybe these negative assets into positive assets, somehow into opportunities, or we read them as opportunities. So we have negotiated the temporary use of these wastelands, we call them interstices, proposing activities that were not inscribed in urban regulations, gardening, recycling, cooking, and also knowing that space is a very valuable resource in big cities where land is expensive and scarce. So it was clear that it's difficult to imagine that you can occupy long-term such spaces, but somehow it was possible to occupy or negotiate occupation of some of them for temporary use. And temporary use also implies that the project has a short life and disappear after a while. And we knew that this would be a problem. We equipped, I would say, the project with mobile spatial devices in such a way that it could move on new location when the site is not available anymore. Differently, perhaps, with Deserto, we emphasize the relational dimension of our tactics. They are unfolded in spatial objects and infrastructural devices like the pallets, like the mobile modules, which increase connectivity, stimulate desire and pleasure, but also generate somehow political awareness and civic responsibility at the scale of proximity, encouraging groups of inhabitants to appropriate space through activities. And the quality of these tactical devices, it's exactly this mobility, the temporality, informality, which enable a particular type of urban resistance through technique of infiltration and détournement. And they are also empowering minor culture, minor languages, and minor urban practices to validate local tradition and personal abilities to resist somehow dominant forms of knowledge and prescriptive ways of living in the city. Because when we were speaking about, let's say, facilitating access to space, we were interested not only in the occupation and use of this space, but also in generating, let's say, participation in decision-taking, in allowing people to decide and to control the organization and the management of the space. One way of, starting was to use urban trash in order to construct the first negotiated location for a garden, and gardening itself as activity was somehow a tactical beginning because it was a very simple way of getting a lot of people included and also interested, but also getting them to take responsibility, which is the responsibility of the gardener, the responsibility of the everyday life caring of something, of a seed that you are sowing and protecting and cultivating further. So the garden became a bit the metonym of the project was the symbolic kind of representation of the whole spirit of the project. But we have obtained a mineral space which was difficult to start a garden on, and that's why we found pallets as a material which can be collected for free, and it was a way of building up the possibility of a garden on a mineral surface, using, let's say, collective collection. People would collect in different areas these materials, But also, somehow we started with zero cost. So it was important to demonstrate that you can start something out of scratch. And another important element is that it was dismantleable. And also this element, the pile of pallets that was there all the time, allowed different configurations, so different new devices that would be built as it goes in the process according to the new activities that were developed, and also to the new people that will join in the group. There was also a series of mobile modules that were more elaborated, say a mobile kitchen, a mobile library, a mobile media lab, this one. They were all mobile, so it was possible to pack them and to push them to also in the area, in different places, and to associate them in such a way that different activities can take place at the same time. And somehow this was our architecture. Yeah, it's a very different way of conceiving architecture made of these temporary devices. It was a kind of ongoing process of making architecture. This was, for example, a dormitory when my students from Sheffield came during a live project. So it was another iteration of these temporary constructions made of pallets. But what was important is that these modules, these devices, were part of, or were sometimes generating a lot of networks and connections, agencies also, and agencies in which they were agents. They had an active role. And they animated not only space but also, social interactions. And this is again another maybe dimension that such an architecture can have, is to be at the core of this multiple agency generation, And this agency also were ways of acting otherwise, as Anthony Giddens, sociologist Anthony Giddens defines agency, but acting with others also. They unfolded gradually in time around, everyday life activities, which were very diverse in their nature, and they were kind of initiating, I would say, a transgression process in time. So each time it was pushing a little bit. And I think also maybe this notion of delayed transgression, it's something interesting to discuss about. So we started with reclaiming space, then self-building, gardening, chatting, discussing on an informal, in an informal way, making. I think it was a space in continual fabrication. This was very, very important because the space itself generated this, active condition that users were put into, and they embraced little by little. So it was, again, important to mix without hierarchy, different types of activities. Some were about, knowledge productions, others were about material production. And also, we started also to have economic activity, and this was very important because it was a way of complexifying the project and adding to what seems to be just a leisure place other dimensions, other qualities. Of course, there were lots of workshops taking place, skill exchange moments where, this collective knowledge was mutual. And I think little by little we arrived at, to change the nature of the project, which started as a garden. I think it became a kind of social cultural place, which was important not only at the level of Paris, but at the level of the area, of the neighborhood, but at the level of Paris too, and also internationally. We had a number of research seminars that were public, where people, the user of the project, were involved and they were given a voice. So there were moments of co-research also. And what was also interesting is that we obtained at a certain moment an indoor space, again for temporary use, and this generated other situations and again other activities, and it was very important to be able to run the project in continuity over the 4 seasons. The key was a very important device for self-management, because this was a way to symbolize, let's say, your relation with a project, and also to embody responsibility. It was clear that the person that will have a key has some responsibility over the space, and there were members, say, that didn't have papers. Yeah, they were illegal immigrants, but they had a key. And this was an incredible empowering tool, I think, for them. And nothing disappeared. I think it's very interesting that things were, I mean, there were things that were stolen, but not in this specific moment when the keys were distributed. And at a certain moment we had to leave because the city had a project. I mean, we knew about this. But, and we didn't want to stay. We wanted to negotiate another location. This was very important because this was a way of changing also this, I would say, psychology, which was on both sides. That an eviction, for example, it's a tension moment, an oppositional moment, when you have to fight to stay, and we had a lot of problems with the city hall because they didn't understand that we do not want to stay. We just want another place. So we had to protest. We have collective signature, and again, something that could be perceived negatively, yeah, because a moment of revolt, was very positive for the group, because this was a moment of awareness, of collective awareness, that in order to have a space, you have to fight for it, and you have to construct, the set of arguments that will put you in I think, in a power position, and I think it was very emancipatory as a moment. So we have obtained at the end 3 new locations. And we were able to dismantle the garden and to reinstall it in a new location, which is, I think, again, was quite a powerful moment, because it demonstrated to us, to the user, also to the municipality, that this is possible, that it's possible to relocate a project, it's possible to have a certain continuity, even within the temporary condition. And since then, the project moved again after a while, but we stepped out from the project at this stage and left the inhabitants to, and the user of the project that now became stakeholders of the project, to negotiate the new relocation. And again, this was very important because they have completely taken control, but they were equipped to do it. They had the kind of material equipment as well as the knowledge to to how to do it. They went again at the city hall and negotiated a new relocation, and the city hall was much more, I think, open. And what was quite interesting is that, again, this continuity within the temporary use made the project somehow socially sustainable, reinforced the social structure of the project, because with each relocation, there were the strongest, let's say, strongly attached members that continue to go wherever the project was located. I mean, they were located in the neighborhood. But there were also new people that were living nearby that joined in, and they also somehow learn, about this process. But also the power structure, yeah, the power structure of the project was continually questioned and revised, and I think that this was very healthy politically, because there was no there was no power that will stay or take over. And it is a sort of durability within the temporary based on repetition and ritournelle, to speak Deleuzian, that allowed for a certain continuity and at the same time for a reinstitution. Each time the space were reinstituted and the subjects resubjectivized themselves in gardens, debates, exchange, political projects. This was another way to represent the project. It was important for us to make visible this social structure of the project, the social networks that were behind, the architecture that we created. And I think that this is also the architecture, all the networks and all the connections that we created between people. So here there are people. These are distances. This is the area, and the colors are representing different activities that will connect a group of people. So in 2001, me and my partner Constantin Petcu, who are the founder of the project, with our students from Paris and with some friends, a sociologist and another architect, started the project with interest in politics and architecture. And they were from Paris. The second year, my students from Sheffield came and built a prototype of the garden. We obtained a space. And again, there were not many people at that time. There were few locals. And in 2004, there were, I think, more activities emerging. We were still quite important in the network. There were also some local people that started to be involved in many, loops, as well as people from Paris and even from abroad. So they came through different art projects or architectural projects or educational projects. And, from gardening, architecture, Bluey sculpture, for example, there are lots of cultural activities developed. And in 2005, I think, in 2005, after we moved, we can see that the social network is more or less the same. There are other persons that starts to be nodes in the network, important stakeholders, but it didn't really change. Nevertheless, I think what is important to see is that all this has been built in time, and I think time is a fundamental dimension of such architecture. My colleague Jeremy Till in Sheffield said at a certain moment that time and not space should be seen as the primary context in which architecture is conceived. And I think he's right, maybe from a different point of view. But I think positioning time as the key context for architecture makes space more active and more social, and release it somehow from its static formalism. So we realize that conceiving and practicing active social space takes time. One needs time for actively reinvesting space and creating agencies and experiencing all these different locations of meeting people, reinventing uses. I think all this takes time, and but also these are important, these are fundamental, because it is in this way that we are encouraging activities to emerge and share moments to take place. Another way of mapping the project was to look at the trajectory of each individual and how they contributed to the trajectory of the project. Here is the let's say the barcode of the project, and these are the different individuals that enter the project in time. And each person is not just one line; it's a number of lines that describe the different types of activities that they were engaged in. We can see, that in the beginning, for example, between 2001 and 2003, not much happened. That there were just these, architectural negotiations, political negotiations, also that we had with the owner of the space, which was the railway company, to take, let's say, to obtain a lease and to occupy the space. But little by little, there were other people coming, first for leisure. Yellow is leisure, and the project started as a leisure space, as a garden. But little by little, it get complexified, and we can see that there were, at a certain moment, artists coming in with, developing cultural activities. And we can also read the seasons. We can see that, in the summer there is more leisure than in the winter. And so obtaining an indoor space was very important, because this was also a way to bring other activities into the project. And this is the moment when we had to negotiate the relocation. This kind of brown, it's symbolically represents political activity or civic activity. And we can see that lots of people were shifting at this moment to, well, they got politicized somehow to go to the city hall and protest. And for us, this is a very important outcome of the project, to get this collective political subject of the project formed somehow, because it was this subject that was somehow able to perpetuate, to continue the project further, to self-manage it also. So in this process, these are small transgression, I would say, at the level of the subjectivity. So people resubjectivize themselves, and we resubjectivize ourselves too. So we started also to do other activities that we didn't think that we will have to do it, like, for example, taking care of kids. This was something that was, but they were the first users. So we were somehow, it was this contingency that it was specific to such a project that we had to invent the tools to deal with it. Another way of representing is we have looked at how the process of management has evolved in time with these moments of eviction and relocation. And in fact, these are the spaces that we have occupied or the project has occupied, because at this moment in time at Echobox 2 we have left and we have developed the second project that I'll show, which was very much influenced in terms of methodology by the first project. But this moment and this moment were very important. The management the rules that we have set up at this moment were somehow transferred into the second moment when we were still there as advisors, and we formed the group of users that was able to negotiate with the City Hall in the second instance and started the self-management process. And these are the activities, for example, that took place in time. So we can see how we evolved from, architecture that in fact continued. The design process continued. It's red architecture. The whole duration of the project somehow, because it was incremental. So there were lots of things. The modules have been built in time. There are the different configurations were also built in time according to the activities that will take place. And also the yellow, which is gardening and leisure in general, we can see that it's there, but sometimes it's not dominating. There are other things that are dominating. Like here, it's very much the economic activities that has been developed. And also at the moment of eviction, there was a peak of activity, and this was a kind of momentum that was very useful for the negotiation process. So maybe if it had happened at this moment in time, we wouldn't have been able to obtain a second space. So all this, I think, are interesting ways of analyzing and representing and understanding a project which is not only visual or visible, but has a lot of invisible components that sometimes need to be visualized. This is the funding scape, the type of funding that we have obtained. This funding is coming from different pots. The colors represent different sources of funding. And there were moments also we didn't have funding in the beginning, but what we had was the social capital, lots of voluntary work in light green, and a bit of pay work. From the funding we were able to pay specialists, sometimes to pay also people to take care of different things, and this is interesting that we manage at the moment when we left, let's say, the project, there was funding. So we left it equipped with money and also with 2 posts that were subsidized, and they were able somehow to take further the development of the project. So it's important how we shifted also from the small scale to the at least neighborhood scale to an urban scale, because we passed from one space to 3 other spaces. We influenced also other projects in the area. There were other gardens and our own project in a similar area, and also this is the third Echobox, which was somehow each time these projects are activating the area around. So it's a mechanism of, I would say, dispersive occupation of space. It is an almost anti-gentrification mechanism, and all this through temporary use. Usually, I think temporary use is accused of, generating gentrification. There are lots of temporary projects that are bringing attention and, kind of rising the profile of an area. And in this case, it was exactly opposite. So it is a rhizomatic project also in terms of how information has been transmitted, because the mother plant, our initial project, transmitted to the leaf the information and made another plant possible, and then so on. So somehow it is a form of live network, I would say, a network which is dependent on each leaf, but also each leaf has the necessary information to pass on the project. So I'll go quickly through the second project. 5 minutes, okay. I'll go quickly through the second project to see how such a methodology can be transferred or can be taken further in a slightly similar, slightly different context. So we started Passage 56 when our involvement in Echobox stopped. And Passage 56, it's also in a ZUS, in a zone urbaine sensible, but quite similar, but in another context. This time, in the first project, we had 3,000 square meters. This time, we had to intervene. We were invited, so it was not our initiative. The first project was a self-initiated project. This one was an invited project by the local regeneration agency, and it was a project of conceiving participative design of a former passageway that was closed. So it was a space that was absolutely impossible to build and to use in the east of Paris. In a also very dense area, a high-rise and medium-rise residential area with a lot of social problems, it was the quality of it was that it was situated somehow on the main pedestrian street, it was. As I said, a former passageway that was blocked at a certain moment by the construction of these blocks in the 80s. And for this reason, there were also windows that were kind of looking into the space. So it was impossible to build. It was just 200 square meters. And it became like a garbage dump. And we organized a kind of consultation with the people in the area about possibilities of doing things there, and we considered the different suggestions, and because they were very conflicting, we invited them to come to test them, and I think this was a lesson that we learned from the first project when we have initiated this participatory project through doing somehow, through testing, through seeing, because if you just speak about participation, people won't understand what it is. But by doing it, I think it starts to make sense, and it's also, it can be negotiated. So we started also to map the possible actors and the possible spaces with which we can connect this space. As in Echobox, we started with somehow reclaiming the space by cleaning it, by testing activities. This was a way also of seeing who's coming, who from those that gave ideas will also, give time, will also be interested enough to come and test. In this case, we didn't use urban trash, but we used what people brought. Different pieces of furniture that would allow us to test the different activities. And in this case, the building was not mobile, but was dismountable and allowed this reversible occupation. And this was also a kind of requirement that we had to put in the contract because the, let's say, the commissioner was not confident about such a project, so they ask if it doesn't work, we should go with it. We should be able to dismount it and to go with it. And I think that this was also interesting because it's probably one of the conditions of ecological architecture to not last, to be conceived in such a way that it lasts one generation or two generations, and leave also place to other generations to decide about it. And it was conceived and built collectively. So this part was built during a training process. It was a small office space, and the vegetable delivery from a farmer would take place in the ground floor. Another condition was to have a space which is self-sustained somehow energetically, in such a way that we are producing energy but also water, which is necessary for the garden. So not only the conception and the building would be zero cost. I mean, in this case it was not zero cost, but also the maintenance is zero cost. So it could be maintained through voluntary work, but also all the kind of flows and were secure somehow. And this is important also, that we had these three phases, the informal occupation and testing of different activities, the open construction side, and this somehow pushed us to transgress the regulations, because the construction site is usually closed, but we transformed the construction site into a cultural project. So this allowed us to open it. And this is the last stage where, as I say, there are internal cycles, and this makes the site a living machine, but also a space to test ecological collective practices. So we have added somehow in our own program this ecological dimension as important for the collective practices in the cities. So you can see images from the collective construction. We had also different ecological principles, like the recycling of different materials. This is the compost kitchen. We have also a dry toilet, which is public, which was also a way of conturning the regulation, because it was a construction toilet that was not dismantled at the end of the construction site. So it was somehow became one of the facilities of the projects. But also it's interesting because these new devices, these new activities are quite attractive for users. So they start to learn and take control. So this is the Kakamen, the one that is managing. This is we are collecting the water also for indoor planting, planting the staircase, and so on. So what was very important, like in the first project, is to keep a space for other activities than gardening, and that will maintain this continual activation of the space. I'm finishing. Just the last picture, so you can see how it looks like, and what are the effects also in the public space, because just 200 square meters that are sometimes opening and activating the public space had a very big effect. And these are images of how the site evolved in time, and what difference was generated in time. And I won't go into detail with this. This was another way of analyzing the project. It's maybe interesting, I will stop here to just compare the two, to see the difference in terms of processes, also in terms of money, in terms of type of activities. We had much more money here, much more concentrating. And I will just finish with this, reiterating again this idea of self-management, autogestion, in fact, in French, which is a word that has a particular significance in the French political history, because it refers directly to the ideological struggle and of the social movements of the 19th century. And Lefebvre was the one that took this term further into urban planning. And in our case, somehow the figure of the worker is replaced by that of inhabitant and user. And this is because somehow, according to Negri, for example, within the contemporary condition, the city has replaced the factory and is the place of predilection for social production. So what we have done is to allow this right to the city, which is not only a right to participate, but also a right to take control of the social and spatial production of the city. Thank you.
Great, thanks very much, Doina. We'll put the lights back on, that'd be great. And we've got maybe 10 minutes for questions, that'd be great. Maybe let's start about fantastic talk, really exercising, really fascinating. I won't ask the first question. Please.
Can I ask how you were funded for the first project? How did you survive?
Yeah. Well, in the first year, we self-funded it somehow. I mean,
so you are a rich person.
No, no. We were both teaching.
Thank you.
Yeah. So we found it through our time somehow, and we were not depending on the project, but little by little. I think that it's very important to go over this stage and to say that. During this time, we managed to kind of shape enough the project to become credible for applying for this public funding that we were kind of aware of, and we obtained in time European fundings. But we had to write projects, we had to write applications, of course. And at this moment, I mean, I didn't show the last project, which is very complex, that we are running now. We had 1.5 million from Europe, so it's we build up credibility and capacity, I would say, to obtain funding and to self-fund our practice. And we have also 7 people working in the office. Some of them are paid, so it's all are paid, but some of them are paid by the office. And I think it's very interesting to see this evolution also in terms of how one can become also partially independent from the market, if I can say, and also get recognized, because also the participatory work, it's usually not recognized, as important or as part of the architectural practice. And somehow by finding these sources and by sometimes redirecting them. So for the 56 projects, we had money for training, for example, and this we kind of use this money also to pay our work. So it was not directly for architecture, but we were able to reconvert it somehow. And little by little, you get recognized for such a practice. So we are currently quite well known, I would say, at least in this stream of participatory architecture. And for us, it's important that we have created this reference.
Hi, I just want to follow from that question. Thank you for a fantastic, wonderful talk. In Dublin right now, we have a lot of young, gifted designers who are following this trend to essentially be the actor in relation to the provision of things like public space in derelict sites. And I recently was at a meeting where I said, you should be seeking, first of all, you should do something so phenomenally systematic and organized as to know where everybody was at every single time. I think in Dublin, these young, gifted professionals should have timesheets which actually monitor every hour they spend providing this service for the city.
Absolutely, yeah.
So this issue that we started talking about in the beginning of the conference about transgression being sometimes in, sometimes outside, sometimes mixed, in a way, young practitioners particularly could be or should be actively thinking about the hourly input of this service, which is at this point not generally recognized, but there will be a time.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, this timeline is a fascinating timeline. Just to relate to the question, right? Who pays for the instigation, who pays to keep the lights on, who actually gets the door open, who gives the key?
Absolutely. But I will add another comment to this. I would say that we are working not with one type of economy, which is this monetary economy or financial economy. We are also working with, I don't know, affective economy, social economy, and I think it's very important to well, first identify this and also advocate this. The fact that such projects also are because of this diverse economy that exists within a project, and they are important, you know, for the well-being, I would say, of the society. Yeah.
One of the things that we've been doing as part of the MArch here is involving ourselves in a very small way in similar kind of projects. And partly as well because of the criteria for validation, we're looking at asking students to cost their projects. And one of the challenges for us has been to say that money isn't the only measure of in which you might value things and cost things, therefore. And so we're asking students to try and cost their social capital, or not cost it, but value it, I suppose, is a better way of putting it. Which is, you know, another way of valuing the projects that you're doing, obviously.
Yeah, yeah. I think we are doing this in Sheffield too.
Yeah, of course. But I suppose what the question is, that we found really hard, and I think perhaps your diagrams begin to answer, is how do you value, how do you put a value to things like social capital? And so when you're putting together bits, how do you communicate that? Is it through the diagrams? It's that?
Well, I think it's very difficult. I mean, there are quite abstract diagrams, and I think they are maybe easy to understand in a research community. But so sometimes we have to go and explain. It won't go in a bit. So for a bid, you will represent it in a different way. But we are mentioning this always. We are mentioning the also the capacity that we have to mobilize social capital, because I think that this is there are certain I don't know instances like Europe. I think they understand very well this language. They understand the necessity or certain programs. Our last project is funded by Life Plus program for environmental governance, and there it was absolutely, essential to mention the social capital, and to mention that such a project is not only that it's funded on social capital, but it generates social capital. It generates also, I would say, awareness and activation at the civic level.
Do you think part of the problem here is one of terminology? Because although you described yourself as an architect, what you actually account for is being a teacher, a social organizer, an accountant, a whole raft of things. Yeah. Professionally, we are still stuck in this disciplinary mindset that says, I'm either this or that. But what it seems to me you're starting to do is something that I recognize very well from the visual arts. In the visual arts, we understand there's a tension between on one hand artists who we call best of breed, and artists at the other end who we call compound curs. And what is starting to develop is an understanding that unless we become compound curs, we can't do what you're doing, but we may have to lie to the institution about what we really are.
Yeah.
And it seems to me you've demonstrated.
Yeah, but I think we have to educate the institution too. I think that this is somehow part of the job, and for us was a challenge. For example, in the beginning we were much more active and visible in the contemporary art world, and this was part of the discussion that I had with Didier yesterday, which is much more welcoming. I mean, you can do anything in, under this banner somehow, and you are protected by the gallery, by the cultural institutions. They are negotiated for you. But to kind of bring such a practice in the real world and to negotiate with the institutions that are governing, I would say, space in the real world, it's much more difficult. And I think that this is the challenge. At least this was the challenge for us. And how to make this discourse and this, approach not mainstream, but recognized as valid. And I think it accelerated with the crisis. I think that there is a huge interest from the point of view of institutions and in kind of supporting this project. It's a different era. This is something I'm telling to my students, this is your time now, be bold. Do not follow the existing path because, it's a crisis that it's a threshold towards something else. And what we need probably is, on one side, to negotiate with institutions, but also on another side is to create the tools for education for such a new type of practice.
Thank you. That was a fantastic demonstration of what a lot of us should be doing, I think. I'm interested in the kind of agency of the garden and all of this. There's kind of quite worldwide interest in small-scale gardening being a place for activism, but actually in terms of the design, I'm wondering if you have reflected upon or could comment on this the idea of the garden and gardening as affecting new public space or new urban design.
Well, I think again it was a bit of a test when we started with gardening. It was more of an intuition, and we had the precedent of, let's say, guerrilla gardening in New York. We knew that normally it's a project that works, but we wanted, the difference would be that we wanted it to be negotiated. We wanted the people to feel secure when they are gardening in a space and to not, be illegal or whatever, because this excludes a lot of people that do not take this risk. So we wanted it to be open to the ordinary citizen, whatever is this. We didn't target the immigrant community or the youth or whatever disenfranchised group, and it was a very a very easy to understand also device for any culture, and also what was an impediment, like to have this garden on a mineral space became an advantage because it created. People had to build their gardens, so it was a way of engaging them from the very beginning instead of having a plot already there. And so they had to put the earth into the garden, and also that there was the side present of the palette because they were thick, and so they had a particular dimension that created somehow collective space between these plots, and this was very important because this maintained activities between what was perceived as individual plot. I think that somehow it was not a simple garden and not a simple gardening activities. It was one which was quite complex and complicated also by the device. Thank you.